Hello, my world history students. This is week 4, and this is going to be your first video lesson of the week. Today we're going to talk about the Reformation and Luther and how they reformed the Christian church during this time. Okay, so do you remember learning during the Middle Ages that the Catholic Church was extremely powerful? We talked a lot about this when we talked about the feudal system, how the Pope was at the top of that pyramid. And he is even more powerful than the rulers because he answered to God alone. Okay. The Catholic Church collected taxes and selected and removed kings. It was the only Christian church in Western Europe for a long time. Things changed during a period we called the Reformation, when people tried to reform or make changes in the church. The Reformation happened during the humanist movement of the Renaissance, basing their beliefs on ancient Greek and Roman philosophy. Last week we talked about the Renaissance and one of its most famous people. Do you guys remember who that was? All right, so people saw that some religious leaders were tremendously wealthy. Some clergy lived like kings in lavish palaces surrounded by beautiful art. The clergy gave their friends the best jobs while the church demanded higher taxes from its people. The church even offered indulgences in order to raise more money. An indulgence was money paid to the church to receive forgiveness for your sins. Obviously, if you had money, you were able to afford indulgences and therefore forgiveness. So back then, you could basically buy your way into heaven or buy forgiveness from the church if you had enough money. Therefore, less fortunate people could not afford to pay for forgiveness. Some people began to question the power of the church and sought to change. In the 1370s, an English priest named John Wycliffe began to preach that the Bible was the source of all truth. Father Wycliffe said people should learn to read the Bible and not rely on the church to read it to them. He was called a heretic, a person who denies the church's teachings. As punishment, he was forced to retire from the priesthood. Father Wycliffe began translating the Bible from Latin to English so the people of England could understand it. The church soon banned his translation, but his work helped spark the coming Reformation. Remember, in the Middle Ages, and even during the Renaissance, most people who were not wealthy could not read or write. So it fell to them to go to church to have the Bible read to them. And the person who's reading the Bible, or the clergymen who are in charge of the church, it's their interpretation of the Bible that parishioners are hearing, okay? So people who are not wealthy were not able to read the Bible themselves and interpret its meaning, what it means to them personally. In the 1550s, the Catholic Church began a counter-reformation in which it tried to regain its position of power in Europe. The church ended indulgences. A church court called an inquisition set out to find and condemn heretics. The Inquisition charged those who questioned the church's teaching with being heretics and had put them to death. Many books were burned. During the Counter-Reformation, missionaries spread Catholic beliefs to other countries such as Vietnam, Japan, and the Philippines. Missionaries also made efforts to strengthen the Catholic faith in France and Spain. Eventually, after many bloody wars, European countries such as Germany, Netherlands, and Scandinavia became predominantly Protestant, while countries such as Italy, Spain, and France remained Catholic. This took power away from the Catholic Church because it was no longer the only church in Europe. The Reformation made monarchs, kings and queens, more powerful. Teachers encouraged more people to learn to read so that they could read the Bible themselves. All right, so now we're going to learn about some of the people who helped with the Reformation during this time. Dateline 6032, extra, extra, read all about it. The Catholic Church arrests respected Italian scientist, brings Galileo Galilei to Rome for trial. After building a better telescope, Galileo found evidence to support Nicholas Copernicus's theory that the Earth isn't the center of the universe. Galileo had observed 4 objects moving around Jupiter. He suggested that if these moons revolved around Jupiter and not Earth, then the Earth couldn't be the center of the universe. The church wanted Galileo to withdraw his scientific statements because they went against his teachings. The church had long stated that the earth was the center of the universe, and everything revolved around it. Galileo also got into trouble for his ideas about the Bible. Galileo said that although he understood the Bible's actual words, he wondered if people had made a mistake in interpreting its meaning. The church decreed that it would not tolerate such thinking. Only the clergy could interpret the Bible. During his trial in 1632, Galileo was 68 years old and in poor health. He worried what his fate would be if he continued to argue with the church. Galileo remembered that in 1600, church authorities burned Giordano Bruno at the stake for declaring that Earth was not the center of the universe. Galileo conceded to the church's request and announced that he was wrong in his beliefs. The church then spared his life and instead gave Galileo permanent house arrest as punishment instead. He stayed under house arrest until his death in 1642. It was only until 1992 that the Catholic Church eventually reversed the charges against Galileo. So back then, if you went against the church's teachings, you were condemned. You were a heretic, you were excommunicated. Instead of killing Galileo, he sided with the church to save his own life and had to live under house arrest, kind of like we are right now, for the rest of his life. So that's kind of harsh. So let's talk about some of the reformers of the church. So we notice that there's lots of problems with the Catholic Church and its teachings. So now we're going to get into the people who helped change it. Joan of Arc was one of those people. The church burned at the stake many people accused of heresy, but a young woman named Joan is probably one of the most famous. Joan of Arc was born in Domremy, France. While a young teen, Joan said she had visions of saints. She explained that these saints told her to help save France and its king, Charles VIII, from the British. The French had been fighting the English for nearly 100 years, and France was losing. French soldiers supported Joan of Arc, while she led thousands of troops into battle. She directed attacks and encouraged the soldiers to win. Her efforts led to a French victory over the English in Orleans. Joan of Arc did not carry a weapon into battle, only a flag displaying religious pictures as she led her troops on horseback. The English eventually captured Joan and put her on trial. They accused her of heresy. They brought many charges against Joan, but one of the most serious was that Joan claimed direct inspiration from God. The Catholic Church decreed that this was not possible. Joan of Arc also wore men's clothes, which many thought was a crime against God. Remember, back then, women weren't even allowed to wear pants. Really weird. Authorities also accused her of practicing witchcraft. They found Joan guilty of heresy and burned her at the stake in 1431. In 1920, the Catholic Church made Joan a saint. All right, now on to the big guy of the Reformation, Martin Luther. He was a German man who played a huge role in the Reformation of the Catholic Church. Martin was a young man studying law when he was caught in a vicious storm and was nearly struck by lightning. He prayed and vowed to serve God if he survived, so he became a monk instead of a lawyer. Luther was a religious scholar. He thought the Bible should be the everyday language of the people so that anyone who wanted to could read it. Luther thought the Bible contained the whole truth about God. The people did not need the clergy to tell them what the truth was. Luther especially disliked the practice of indulgences. Luther wrote a list of 95 arguments called the 95 Theses against the practices of indulgences, among other things. Historians say he posted them on a church door in Wittenberg, Germany. Because of Johannes Gutenberg's invention of the printing press, do you remember what the first book was printed was called? We talked about this. Printers copied Luther's document fairly quickly and distributed it to many different people. So with the invention of the printing press, people did not have to copy down books by hand to pass on copies. They could make books at a faster rate and more quantity of books. The church became worried after Luther's actions. What if people thought they didn't need priests and relied solely on the Bible? They might stop going to church, and the church would lose power and influence. The church responded by excommunicating Luther. Excommunication is being kicked out of the religion or the church. Excommunication meant that Luther was kicked out of the church and could no longer be a monk, a very serious punishment. Fearing for his life, Luther went into hiding. During his time in hiding, Martin Luther translated the Bible into German. Many people were able to read the Bible for the very first time. Many also agreed with Luther's dislike of indulgences and his translation of the Bible into everyday languages of the people. Followers of Martin Luther who protested the practices of the church classified themselves as Protestants, or more specifically, Lutherans. Get it? Martin Luther, Lutherans? Luther led the first branch of the Protestant Christian church. So that's where we get the Lutheran section and the Protestant sect. All right, let's talk about John C. Calvin. Like Martin Luther, Calvin was another figure during the Reformation. A French religious scholar, Calvin left for Switzerland when Catholics began attacking Protestants for their different church views. John Calvin believed salvation came from faith and that the Bible was the source of religious truth. Calvin's followers believed in the concept of predestination, which means that God determines eternal destiny. In other words, God already knows who will go to heaven, and nothing anyone can do can change what God has already decided. So kind of like fate, like your life is predestined. Calvinism approved of dressing simply and disapproved of laughing in church, dancing, swearing, and fighting. You might have heard of an English Protestant group that followed many of John Calvin's ideas. They called themselves Puritans. As their term suggests, they wanted to purify or cleanse the church of anything Catholic. Eventually, they left for Holland and then America in the early 1600s in search of religious freedom. So the first Europeans to come to America to establish colonies were Puritans coming from England. See how all of this is tying in? You should be making a lot of connections right now with these names. All right, King Henry VIII. This British monarch was a very strong supporter of the Catholic Church. Things changed when the king wanted to annul or end his marriage to Catherine of Aragon because she was unable to have a son to be the heir to the throne of England. So back then, you could divorce your wife if she didn't give you a son because you needed a son to carry on the name of your family lineage. And we talked about this, how family lineage was very, very important, and your name had more significance than what you did or who you were back then. All right, when the Pope refused to grant the king an annulment, King Henry VIII and England broke from the Catholic Church and founded the Church of England, or the Anglican Church. The king also took the land the Catholic Church owned and gave it to those loyal nobles who supported him and the Church of England. For religious leaders, remaining loyal to the Pope and the Catholic Church was not an option. Those who did were put to death. All right, Queen Mary, this is a good one. As British monarch, Queen Mary tried to return the Catholic faith to power in England. Her regime persecuted and arrested Protestants, burning hundreds of people at the stake for their beliefs. It got so bad that people nicknamed her Bloody Mary. So that's where the nickname comes from, Bloody Mary, because she put all these people to the stake and killed them because they disagreed with the Catholic Church. All right, now we have, last but not least, Queen Elizabeth. Known as Good Queen Bess, Elizabeth was the daughter of Henry VIII and half-sister of Mary. After Mary died, Elizabeth came to power. Queen Elizabeth was a Protestant and a member of the Anglican Church. She made the Protestant faith the main religion of England, where it still is to this day. All right, so that was a lot today. I'm going to stop the video here for today. We listed some of the major players in the Reformation age, and we also talked about how people tried to reform the Catholic Church, and especially the practice of indulgences. So we're going to get more into some more Reformation topics in our next video. But I have 3 questions to show you, okay? So here is my whiteboard. You are going to pause it here and you're going to write down these 3 questions. Okay. So you're going to answer me these 3 questions about this video lesson. And by the time this video goes up, you can come on Wednesday morning at 9:30 in our first Zoom meeting, and you can show me your answers, or you can email it to me. Most of you already have my email address, your answers as well. Okay. If you do the questions for this video and the second video this week, your name is going to be entered into the Zoom raffle to win a gift card, a $25 gift card this week. Also, if you do your con assignments, if you're online, or your worksheets, that's another way to be entered into the winning to win a $25 gift card. Another way is to make sure you're following the big 5 in our Zoom meetings, that you're being respectful and being safe, okay? So you have 3 ways to enter every week: through the videos, video lessons, through con or worksheets, and through following the big 5. So make sure you guys are doing that. There's a pretty good chance that if your name's in there, you'll win at some point. So keep up the good work, and I will see you for the continuation of our lesson on the Reformation on Thursday. Bye, guys.